Hi, everybody. I just see a lot of people flowing in right now. I'm going to start fairly almost right on time, but I'm just welcoming everyone as you're joining the talk tonight on insomnia, the dangers of the sleepless hero. So if that's what you're expecting, you've come to the right place. Right. Okay, I think my video is on, and hello everybody, and another greeting as you're flowing in here tonight for the talk on insomnia, the dangers of the sleepless hero. And I'll start pretty much on time. And okay, I see some raised hands. So Elizabeth, can you see if there are any issues? Elizabeth is a moderator tonight. So I see a bunch of raised hands. Is there an issue I should know about before I start?
Good evening, Talia. No, people are just saying hello and that they're recording.
Ah, okay. Okay, and it looks like it's recording even though I didn't hit record. So I'm just going to start.
Wonderful. Everyone's welcome and we're so glad you're here.
Ah, okay, great. Hello, everybody. Oh, okay. I will more formally introduce myself in a second once I get my technical aspects together here. But welcome. I'm very excited to be talking to you tonight about a topic that is so important at any time, really, but also I would say especially now when, maybe there are people having more trouble than usual with sleeping. So this is Insomnia, the Dangers of the Sleepless Hero. And for those of you who are joining us tonight and who will stay till the end, 3 of you will be selected to win this great prize valued at over 100. So it's a lovely diffuser for your essential oils, a metal diffuser, a combination essential oil called Peaceful Night, and a combination product called Sleep, which I will be talking about tonight as well. All right. So just a quick introduction to myself, for those of you who have not met me. This is me, and I am Talia Charney. I am a holistic nutrition and wellness coach. I'm also the nutrition and health education manager for Now Health Group, which is one of the sponsors tonight, a co-sponsor with Healthy Planet. So thank you to Healthy Planet for co-sponsoring this talk. I'm also I'm not expert. I am author of 2 books. One is The Confident Food Shopper, and the other is The Expert Patient, which was just released. And I have been in the health industry for over 30 years in one capacity or another. Either as a health coach, I was once a personal trainer and fitness instructor, and so on. And this is one topic that I have been particularly interested in. So I'm going to read you a quote here. Scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. It enhances your memory. It makes you more creative. It makes you look more attractive. It keeps you slim, lowers your food cravings, protects you from cancer and dementia, wards off colds and flu, lowers your risk of heart attack and stroke, not to mention diabetes. You'll even feel happier, less depressed, and less anxious. Are you interested to know what it is? Now, don't all answer once because I can't read, but I'm going to assume I'm hearing out there a big yes. This is a quote from Dr. Matthew Walker, who I would say is definitely one of the world experts in sleep today. And this is a quote from his book, and the amazing breakthrough he's talking about, this panacea, is sleep. And after reading his book at least 3 times, and it's all And so, you know, it's very detailed, very thick. I agree with that. It is, if anything is going to be a panacea, I would say it's sleep. So let's find out more about why. Just a quick disclaimer that the contents of this presentation are for informational purposes only and not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or a treatment. So let's start with the obvious. What is sleep? So that's the topic of the night. There's so many things that can be said about it, but it seems to be an adaptive activity. It's not just something where you kind of turn off and rest at night. It's something that was built into us in order to help us better adapt to life. And because of that, pretty much all living creatures sleep except for those that live less than 48 hours. So it's something all animals need to do, but we do it differently. And so we used to think sleep was just sort of a turn-off state, but if you look at, this is our brain waves when we're awake. And this is our brain waves when we're in REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep, which a lot of people associate with dreams, sometimes called dream sleep. And you'll see that actually they look identical. So our brain is not sort of, you know, asleep or dead in a way. It's very much alive. And in other parts of our sleep, the non-REM sleep, there's also lots of activity going on. So we're learning more and more. There's a lot going on. We're still discovering what goes on at night and how does it help us to live better or live longer. So here's just an interesting look at those. I mentioned those two stages. We often divide sleep into our non-REM sleep and our REM sleep. And these can, you know, we can go into great detail, but here's some important stuff to know about the two. Our non-REM sleep is necessary in order to take our memories or the things that we learn in the daytime from short term and store them into the long term, which is of course really important. Our REM sleep integrates those memories, so it gives meaning to them, and this helps us with our creativity. It helps us get the gist of things. And a famous person invented something or came up with an idea or got that aha moment during their dream sleep. So that is really important for our creativity. It also, REM sleep is thought to be important for our emotional IQ as a form of therapy. So it helps us work through things. It's certainly a cheaper form of therapy than some. And here you can see, so throughout the night, we're awake, we cycle through the REM sleep, and then we go through 3 stages of non-REM sleep and back up to the REM sleep. And this happens throughout the night multiple times. The interesting thing is though, at one part of the night, we have a lot more of the non-REM sleep. So it seems early in the night, the non-REM sleep is very important. It occupies most of that first cycle. But by the time we get to the earlier morning, it's that REM or dream sleep that is occupying more time. And the reason that's important is that if we cut off, say, the beginning of the night sleep, or if we cut off the early morning, as we do with many of us, so let's say, you know, we're getting up really early in the morning to go to work or to go to school, and we're cutting out a lot of that REM sleep that's important for creativity and comprehension, then we're losing out on that important aspect of life. Like, what are we doing with the information we learn at work or at school? Are we able to integrate it if we cut off that part of the cycle? So there was a very interesting experiment conducted by this French geophysicist on this plant here, which is called the touch-me-not, many years ago. So this touch-me-not plant, he observed that this plant would move with the sun. As the sun was going up, the plant would move, and as the sun was going down, it would move. And so it was initially thought that it was the sun that controlled the sleep and waking cycle of that plant. But what they did, which is really brilliant, is this touch-me-not was covered into a completely black box where the sun could not get in. And it was filmed, and it was noticed that it still moved in the exact same cycle, even without the sun. And then there was an actual human experiment done of a different type that showed the same thing, that we have this internal clock or circadian rhythm that naturally cycles us through a almost 24-hour period. So it's 24 hours and 15 minutes. So even if we were in a dark cave for days, we would we'll feel awake at some point and sleepier at some point, even without the sun. But we have these other things. We have sunlight, which is really important. We have temperature fluctuations and meal times and all kinds of other things that fine tune that to a 24-hour period. And those are important to keep us in sync with the 24 hours. So there's two things that kind of really drive our feeling awake and feeling asleep. One of them I just talked about, that's that circadian rhythm. We all have it. Genetically, it may be a little bit different in terms of when it goes up and when it goes down, but everyone has it. There's another thing, there's a chemical that controls our drive or our want to fall asleep. It's called adenosine, and the minute you wake up, that chemical starts to build up, and it builds up the sleep pressure, and the pressure keeps building up and building up and building up. And when you get to, late at night, it gets so much that you can't control yourself. You fall asleep, and then the pressure is released. So we got those two things going on. And just remember that, because I'm going to bring it up again in the context of coffee. Now, there are leaders who unfortunately gave us the impression or encouraged us to not worry about sleep. You've all heard about the saying, you can sleep when you're dead. These are things that such leaders used to say. Margaret Thatcher was thought to have the Thatcher gene, they called it, which is there are some people, very few people, probably statistically speaking, none of us, who can thrive on, 5-6 hours a night. Well, Ronald Reagan slept very little, Margaret Thatcher slept very little, and both of them ended up with Alzheimer's. So we don't know if they really thrived on that little sleep. And this gentleman here, Dr. Halstead, he used to live on about 4 or 5 hours a night. And he is the reason, because he was a founder of the surgical training program at Johns Hopkins University, he's the reason today that the poor residency programs for medical students are so insane that they're so deprived of sleep. So he instilled that culture. And apparently he was actually a cocaine addict. So that probably explained how he was able to have all that energy without very much sleep. But there was somebody who got a good 10 hours sleep, and that is Einstein. So let's maybe go with Einstein instead. Sleep is considered so important, and it's considered so harmful or so detrimental to deprive ourselves of sleep that the Guinness Book of World Records have actually banned sleep deprivation as a sort of contest. But they didn't ban this man here, Felix, from free falling from a hot air balloon at 1,000 kilometers an hour out of the surface of the earth, breaking the sound barrier. So that's an interesting priority. So how much sleep do we need? Well, this is somewhat debated, but I would say most experts agree about 8 to 9 hours of efficient sleep, not just any sleep, is best. But there are previous tribal cultures that seem to live off of a biphasic pattern. So they may have slept 8, 9, or even 10 hours, but it was broken up into a nighttime sleep and then a daytime afternoon sleep. And so that's that question. Maybe that is normal. Maybe we're meant to do that. Certainly, many of us experience that afternoon 3 o'clock lull where we feel really tired, and that may just be a part of that inherited tendency for that biphasic pattern. We also know that how much sleep we need is very much age dependent, so that changes. It's not a matter of attitude, that's actually built into us as well. So while parents may be thinking that their teenagers are stubborn because they won't go to bed early enough to get up for school, actually it's believed for the most part that teenagers are wired to stay up later, you know, till 10, 11, 12. And so, and it's thought maybe it has something to do evolutionary wise with them trying to pull away and be independent from their parents. So therefore they have a different sleeping pattern. And of course, the early bird special was created because ideally, as we get older, our circadian rhythm shifts. And for most people, we need to go to bed earlier than we used to. All right. So then the question, should we nap? On the one hand, if we look at, so there was a very big study done by Harvard University, and they looked at a large group, 23,000 Greek adults, who abandoned the siesta that they had been used to for many years. And 30% of those had an increased risk of death from heart disease over 6 years. So that study really seemed to suggest that the siesta is a good thing and we should be doing it. And that's what we're meant to do. But on the other hand, because there's always two sides to something, as I mentioned, there's that pressure that builds up every day by this chemical adenosine. And when we take a nap, it breaks that pressure. And so if you're someone that has trouble getting to sleep at night, it is possibly not a good idea to nap. But if you're someone that has no issue falling asleep at night, you're sleeping generally well, then having an afternoon nap may be great for you. So it depends. Also, we know that genetically speaking, we have different chronotypes. Some of us are owls. We thrive staying up late at night, and some of us are larks. We're those early morning people, and some people kind of lie somewhere in between. And unfortunately, it's very difficult with our typical work culture. Right now, things have gone crazy, but our typical work culture favors the pattern of the lark. And so people who are the owls can really suffer because they have to get to work early. A lot of people have asked the question, or will ask the question, what do I do? I can fall asleep, but I wake up. And in order to even begin to answer that question, we have to ask the question, well, why do we wake up? And there are many different possibilities. So that has to really be answered before. A number of experts, and I've done a lot of research, seem to feel that this is one of the large or the more common contributing factors, although it's still not fully known, is the stress response. So having a marker in our body, it's called cortisol. It's like a stress hormone that should be lower at night, waking us up when we shouldn't. And I'm going to talk about a supplement that may be able to help with that, to temper that stress response. But there are other things. We can be woken up by temperature fluctuations because our temperature gets too high or the temperature in the room is too hot. Alcohol, I'll talk about, sleep apnea, and there's all kinds of other things that can cause us to wake up in the middle of the night. Okay, a startling statistic. So 100 years ago, on average, less than 2% of people slept 6 hours or less. Today, 30% of people sleep 6 hours or less. So that's quite a huge contrast. Because of what's going on right now, I'd be remiss if I didn't say a couple of things about sleep and the immune system. Here was a very interesting study that I wanted to show you, where they took two groups of people. One of them slept a decent amount for about 7 hours or more every night. And the other group was sleeping on average only about 5 hours a night. After a week of monitoring those sleeping patterns, they separated the groups, and they actually took a virus that commonly causes the cold in the nose, the rhinovirus, inserted it into the nasal passages in this 150 healthy adults. And they noticed a very linear relationship between the less that you slept, the higher the rates of infection. So that was one really interesting study showing sleep and your propensity to get sick very closely related. And another interesting study related also to the immune system and sleep is this one that showed that people who are sleep deprived, so they have a group who is sleep deprived, reacted less well to a flu shot. So when you get a flu shot, it doesn't just work equally in all people. What happens is when you get your flu shot, in order for it to work well, is your body has to mount an immune response by producing these antibodies. So what happened is those who were well slept, they had a much better response in terms of the immune reaction than the sleep deprived that only produced 50% of the immune reaction. So that's another important thing. And we don't think about that. Your doctor never says, oh, you know, you're not sleeping well this week, don't come in for your immune shot this week, do it. You know, it's never done that way, but this is an interesting study for sure. And this, again, of course, relates to the flu shot specifically. What does Dr. Matthew Walker have to say when it comes to, he looked extensively at drugs, there's all kinds of drugs that are prescribed for sleep. And his overwhelming conclusion was that none of these drugs induce a natural sleep. So by natural sleep, I mean shifting us into the proper brain pattern that indicates that we are in an effective and effective sleep that's going to help regenerate us. And so he also said that on the whole, there's really no objective benefit beyond what placebo offered for drugs. So that was his conclusion. Drugs are not very helpful at all. The thing that he emphasized, and I think many experts who really understand sleep well, is that sleep hygiene is the most important thing, which that means our practices of how we conduct ourselves in sleep and wake times. So let's talk about that. So the best evidence we have to date to help us with sleep is sleep hygiene. And the evidence is so strong that in 2016, the American College of Physicians recommended cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia as the first line of treatment for insomnia, not drugs. And basically, this CBTI is really just similar to sleep hygiene. So it's more effective than sleeping pills. And it builds on the basic hygiene principles. So I'm going to talk to you about a few of those hygiene principles. Consistent sleep-wake cycle is what many would say, again, experts, if you're going to think about anything when it comes to sleep-wake hygiene, consistent sleep-wake schedules are probably the most important thing you can do. And there are some other sleep-wake hygiene principles here as well. But so that means waking up and going to sleep at the exact same time is really important. Whether it is a work day or the weekend, doesn't matter. And there are many great apps, and we also have alarm clocks, but there are many great apps that can help you get into a consistent sleep-wake cycle. What about coffee? Because I love coffee, so. The unfortunate part about coffee is that it blocks that sleep pressure that I mentioned that builds up over the day. So when you have that coffee, it breaks that pressure and it sort of has to start all over again. But, you know, he does admit, and any expert would say, that we all react differently to coffee because we metabolically break it down at different rates. So some people are going to be more affected by coffee than others, and you probably already know that, although we may not know it as much as we think. Coffee can stay in our system even for somebody who metabolizes it fairly regularly for many, many hours. So you can have a coffee at 10 in the morning and still have some of it in your system well into 10 o'clock at night. If you're really having trouble with sleep, don't rule out coffee just because you think it doesn't affect you. Alcohol. So this is another one that I think is important to emphasize. Many people think, and including myself, I used to think this, that alcohol helps with sleep. And that's because it can help you fall asleep. So obviously it would make you think that it's good for sleep. But it doesn't actually induce a natural sleep. In fact, it affects part of the brain in the front that fragments your sleep. And the problem is that, so what it does is we might wake up many, many times per night, these little micro awakenings, but it's not something that we would notice or necessarily be able to know the next day. So you might say, oh, we slept the whole night, but we're still not refreshed. So that's important to know about alcohol. And again, we metabolize it and react to it differently. So how late you can have it depends on who you are. Having our room, or the place that you sleep, cool at night is another important part of hygiene. And that's another one of those things that it helps adjust our circadian rhythm. And it makes sense because before we lived indoors and we have these artificial ways to adjust our temperature, it would always be cooler at night. Even if you're living in a very hot area like the equator, it's always going to be cooler at night, and that signals your body that you're shifting. So turning down your thermostat, and it's thought to be optimal around 16 to 20 Celsius, is important. And there's other ways we can help bring down our body temperature. One of them is, even though when you have a bath, you are momentarily heated up, but all of the heat comes to your skin and then sort of radiates out, and actually it cools you down. Even just washing our hands under some very hot water in the bathroom or splashing it on our face before we go to bed can help us radiate some heat out of our hands. So our hands and our feet are actually areas of the body that are very good at radiating out heat, which is why in the wintertime they will get very cold too. There's two important things to get our circadian rhythms going very regularly. One of those is having pitch dark at night. That signals to your body by having that, cutting off of light, that we're going into our sleep mode. And then having sunlight in the morning also signals that we're awake. So going out first thing in the morning and exposing ourselves for a short walk in the sun is great. Some people use hacks now, and they get some light therapy that you can expose yourself to in the morning. That's going to expose you to blue light if you use those therapeutic lights. It's that blue light that's really potent when it comes to that wakefulness. But nighttime, it's that blue light that's going to disrupt your sleep. The particular mask here I'm showing, just showing it because I ordered it, and I've used a lot of masks, and this is the only one I've ever found that actually 100% blocks all of the light out. It's just an excellent mask, so I thought I would show it to you. Now, one of the sad things about modern inventions is sometimes, there's a double-edged sword, and the light bulb is one of them. Of course, it's great that we can sit in light and we don't have to carry around a candle. But the blue light that comes from our artificial lights suppresses melatonin, which is a very important chemical produced in our brain and elsewhere, but that chemical is very important to signal to our body that we're going into our sleep time. And every hour of blue light suppresses that melatonin by about 30 minutes. So again, our ancestors, before we had artificial light bulbs at dusk, that would be the end of this strong exposure to blue light. Also, we used to have incandescent bulbs, light bulbs, and they were a little bit more natural in terms of like what you'd see from natural sunlight with a spectrum of light. But the new LED lights have a higher volume of that blue light that's, again, particularly strong in disrupting our sleep. So that's unfortunate. There are different kind of hacks out there that are to try to help us at nighttime to reduce the amount of blue light going into our eyes. So there's different apps on phones and computers that you can use, and they essentially will reduce the blue light coming off of them, and blue blocking glasses as well. I'm not wearing mine now, but I do have some clip-ons. So you certainly can try those things. And if you have to look at your gadgets, and I say have to, close to bedtime, I would recommend trying any of these, but ideally couple hours before we go to sleep, we are staying off of all of these gadgets. Another habit in terms of hygiene that I want to talk about is a lot of people catch up on the weekend. They sleep long periods of time and say they're catching up. So Dr. Walker says sleep is not like a credit system or a credit card. The brain can never recover all of the sleep that it has been deprived of. So in terms of our overall health and the effect of not sleeping, we can't make up for it by sleeping on the weekends. The other issue with sleeping in on the weekends is we're inducing social jet lag. Just another word, instead of flying jet lag, when you're in a different time zone, we're now acting as if we're in a different time zone by shifting when we're waking up or when we're going to sleep. And that can really throw us off for the whole week. So now I'm going to talk about some natural supplements for sleep. And I'm going to start with melatonin because I know this is something that, just have a sip of water actually. Melatonin is something that probably most of you have heard of. If not, again, it's a chemical produced by the pituitary gland in our brain. And it's sort of like the, for a runner, it's like the gun that shoots on your mark, get set, go. Now your body knows that we are ready to go into sleep mode. Gives that signal. So melatonin regulates our circadian rhythm, and it starts at dusk, and it goes again up and down throughout our daily cycle. So it is important, and is that blue light that goes into our eyes that can disrupt our natural production of melatonin, which should build up and hopefully peak at nighttime when we need it. If we look at studies about melatonin, for the most part, where it really thrives, where the evidence is the strongest, is for use for jet lag. So here is a review of 10 trials on melatonin. And there are a couple of interesting things I want to point out if you're using melatonin for jet lag. One of those is that the effective dose for melatonin, according to these studies for jet lag, are between 1/2 of a milligram and 5 milligrams. But what they said is typically those doses are equally effective. If you go for higher doses, you do not fall asleep faster. So what I always generally advise is use the lowest dose that works for you, because even 1 milligram is more than we naturally produce in our bodies at night. So don't go with the higher doses. You know, that's why I really like to have melatonin in a liquid form, so I can taper it to the smallest amount that I find effective. Another interesting thing they noticed is that travelers crossing 2 to 4 time zones, it will be more effective for those. So it depends on how many time zones you're crossing. If you're going across 5 or more time zones, especially in an easterly direction, melatonin will be more effective. You can probably hear the ambulance in the background there. What about insomnia and chronic stress? So as I mentioned before, a number of experts would talk about one of the things that can disrupt sleep or awaken someone in the middle of the night is having a stress response where you have hormones that are out of whack when they're supposed to be low at night and then they're high at night. And there are a type of herbs or grouping called adaptogens. What adaptogens are known to do when they're named that way is they help your body adapt to stress. So tempering the hormones that go out of whack. And so something like this called super cortisol support may help lower that cortisol, that stress response, as does ashwagandha. So ashwagandha here it's actually in this formula, but ashwagandha here this is a concentrated extract. I take this, it's a 1 a day, so I like it, it's simple. Super cortisol is a great combination product with a lot of adaptogens, relora, rhodiola, ashwagandha, and holy basil. So it's kind of more, more oomph. But either way, how adaptogens work is slowly bringing us back into balance. They're not something that you use the night before you want to sleep. They're something that are going to work over a period of some days or a few weeks and then be more effective. Now, with everything that I show you and recommend in terms of duration to take it, or who can or can't take it, please go onto the Now website. We have all the directions on how much to take and the contraindications of who can take them and what things they may interact with will all be on that website for you. Now, what about insomnia with anxiety? Because of course, insomnia has different causes. And when I say insomnia, I'm just talking about, the common general issues that we have with sleep. I'm not talking about sleep apnea or some kind of diagnosed disorder. And anxiety is a common one. We all know that, we can all relate to it. So a lot of the traditional herbs that we use target anxiety. And kava kava is one of those. Kava kava is a herb that has a long history as a traditional drink in the South Pacific Islands. It actually translates the kava kava, the Latin name for kava kava translates as intoxicating pepper. And traditionally it's been used to help with anxiety and nervousness, but also shown to have some other properties which may also together help with sleep. So as an antispasmodic, we might be awake because we have muscle spasms, or our bladder, which is a muscle spasm, so having to get up and go. And also thought to have analgesic effects, which can help with some pain. Actually, kava kava has some good studies behind it with insomnia showing that it reduces latency. So that's the period of time it takes to fall asleep, improves deep sleep and cognitive functioning. And it does this really well for those who have anxiety-related insomnia. Non-psychotic, meaning, not something like bipolar disorder, but just ordinary anxiety-related insomnia. It has some other interesting uses. So for perimenopause and menopause as well, there are studies showing it's helpful for hot flashes, nervousness, palpitations. These things definitely can keep someone up at night who's in perimenopause or menopause. And some indication, some history of use for that hyperactive bladder. So that can also keep somebody up at night. That's kava kava. I'm going to talk about a few other traditional herbs that are common for insomnia. One of them here is passion flower, which I love because it is, I think, bar none, the most beautiful flower that I've ever seen. That's passion flower. And traditionally, it's known to reduce anxiety, to have sedative properties, and also as an antispasmodic as well, kind of relaxing the muscles. And in traditional Chinese medicine, it is thought of as a plant that's helpful for those who have that kind of menopause, again, type of insomnia. We're hot and we're dry. So we get hot flashes and a restless mind. And so in traditional Chinese medicine, they often are, or even in Ayurvedic medicine, they take a supplement and they have another level of sophistication in how they describe it. Not just for sleep, but it's, with a certain angle of heat or dryness, yin or yang. So I really like that. And so traditionally, it's used for not just for restless or nervous insomnia, but also menopause with insomnia. Then we have valerian root, which if you've ever seen it, this is the dried root. If you ever smelt it, it's very stinky. But it has some similar properties as an anxiolytic, as a sedative, and an antispasmodic. So interesting that these seem to go hand in hand. Also, from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, thought it's helpful for that menopause type yin deficiency insomnia. And valerian was once very popular before Valium came along. It was essentially the Valium of the 19th century. And you can read about it in Anne Frank's diary, a very famous book. She talks about valerian as her family using it for stress. Hops is another traditional herb, has a tradition in Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and also amongst Aboriginal Cherokees. In Germany, the German Commission has approved hops as a plant for insomnia, especially with anxiety. So I've shown you 3 herbs here that are sort of helpful for that insomnia with anxiety. It's also a natural or notable source of plant estrogens, which are very common in nature. So you'll find plant estrogens in many, many, many foods that we eat. And so this sleep formula with valerian, hops, and passion flower, you can see would be a great formula for anxiety-related insomnia generally, perhaps also for someone who's perimenopausal or menopausal with insomnia as well. And what I like about, and I'm going to speak about this ingredient GABA here in a second, but what I like about, I like combination formulas because you have the synergy of the different herbs and they're all a little bit different. But I like a formula that has a few, but not too many, because if you have 10, 15, some those type of extremely comprehensive formulas, then you just water down the doses so much of each ingredient that might not really get any kind of therapeutic effect from any of them. This also has valerian is standardized to the active ingredient, which means it's a certain ingredient that is thought to give it its potency. Hops is a concentrated extract here, and also passion flower is standardized as well. I also like a combination formula with no melatonin. That's my preference. And that's because I said melatonin really, the bulk of the study suggests it's great for jet lag. And so I like to use it for that. It is a hormone, so I like to be more conservative with it and not to necessarily have to use it along with my sleep formula every time. So I like to decide when I'm going to use it or not and add it on. And it's very inexpensive, so it's an inexpensive add-on. Let me tell you about GABA, which is in this formula as well. So GABA is a pathway, there's what I call the GABA pathway in our brain. This is a very simplified version, but in our brain, we have these chemicals that convert from glutamine to glutamate. We have GABA and glycine. GABA and glycine are both chemicals, brain chemicals that have a relaxing effect on the brain. Not necessarily sedating, so they don't necessarily make us extremely sort of falling asleep and sedating, but more of a calming. And a good way to think of this is if we had no GABA in our brain would be so overactive, we'd probably be in a state of seizures, of continuous overactivity and overfiring. And there are certain natural plant materials such that we know can affect this pathway. One of those is GABA itself, which is a supplement. It's an amino acid. It's a protein, or it's a building block of proteins. That's what GABA is. And we have a supplement called glycine as well. So these are things that you can actually buy, and they are identical to these chemicals in the brain that have a relaxing effect. Taurine is another natural product you can get that is thought to increase the activity of glycine in the pathway. And there's certain herbs that I've talked about, like valerian and passion flower, that the theory is that they work on the GABA pathway as well. And green tea extract, which we call L-theanine, is in its structure very similar to glutamate in the GABA pathway as well. And so we have this product here, which could be used and is sometimes used during the daytime just to have a calming effect, but at nighttime can be used as well. And you can see here's GABA, glycine, and taurine, as well as some other supportive ingredients like valerian. So GABA, glycine, and taurine working on this pathway. So now you sort of understand a little bit about a product like this and how it works. So we can take in daytime or in the evening. A significant amount of people say that magnesium helps them with sleep, or will come and ask about that for sleep. So I wanted to talk a little bit about magnesium and sleep. One of the ways in which magnesium might be helpful, we think about it, is here again is that GABA pathway. What I didn't show you is that magnesium is a necessary helper here to cause this to convert into GABA. So we need magnesium, and we need magnesium here in two parts of the pathway. But a second and interesting thing is, so a lot of people like to buy magnesium bisglycinate in particular. Bisglycinate is something that magnesium is attached to. But what bisglycinate is essentially is it's two of the glycine. So it may be helpful both because of the magnesium and because of the glycine. So that's something that can be considered. And we also have a sort of more specialized trademarked version of magnesium called Magtine. It's a different type of magnesium, magnesium L-threonate. The magnesium is now attached to something different. And some people find this helpful even when other magnesiums don't work. Magtine has been shown in studies to readily cross the blood-brain barrier. And so when you find a normal kind of magnesium or magnesium doesn't seem to be helping, you could also consider trying Magtine as an alternative. Magnesium, of course, can come in other forms. It can come in flakes and sprays. That may be a preference. Some people don't like swallowing pills, are very sensitive to magnesium. These particular magnesium flakes here are not the same as Epsom salts, but both of them can be used to soak in a bath. What's unique about these magnesium flakes, they're a different type. Again, the magnesium's the same, but they're bound to something different. These magnesium flakes, unlike the Epsom salts, are thought to be more readily absorbed into our cells. And so for someone who has a frank magnesium deficiency, there are at least some small pilot trials that have shown that these magnesium flakes seem to be able to raise magnesium levels in our cell for those who are low. So that's my preference of what magnesium I'd want to use to get magnesium levels up and help with sleep. And then there's essential oils can be a really nice adjunct for insomnia. One of the reasons that I personally like to use essential oils for insomnia is not only because of the essential oils themselves, but it's the part of the ritual at night of getting those essential oils into, say, a diffuser. And our bodies we're very, very habitual. And part of good sleep-wake cycles are the good habits and the consistent habits we have. So, you know, a lot of people say it's so important for kids to have routine, routine, routine. Otherwise, they're going to be moody and they're not going to sleep properly. But it's actually just as important for adults. We don't pay attention to that. I mean, to get up at the same time, go to sleep at the same time, and having any kind of ritual that reminds your brain, okay, it's nighttime. It's time to calm down now. It's time to get, it's time to shift my brain and shift all the chemicals. And having a routine where you take your essential oil and you put it in your diffuser and you do that routine, and same with you brushing your teeth, that will help just the signal to the brain. And this particular diffuser here that you see is a wonderful one created for children specifically. It has these different interchangeable heads and lights so that they will be on the ceiling. You will see stars or other different patterns depending on, and different music types that shift as well. So I like to use Peaceful Night, which is a nice pre-mix. It has, like, lavender is a very classic to help with our sleep. Chamomile is also relaxing. And all this entire formula is geared towards helping us wind down and relax. And having a relaxing bath, I already mentioned that baths can be helpful because of how it may help cool down the body. Whether it's for adults or kids, putting some essential oils in the bath at night that relax us can be helpful. You do need to be careful though. You should always mix the essential oils into oil before you add them into the bath. You don't want to drop the essential oils into the water by itself. They will not mix in the water. They will float on top of the water, and they can burn or irritate the skin. So here are some, relaxing essential oils you can think of. Like, so you could take 3 drops of lavender mix it in a tablespoon of oil, and then put it into a whole bath, and that would be appropriate for baby, a little more for kids, and a little more for adults, and that's a nice ritual. In terms of like essential oils, and because I'm sometimes asked with very, very young little babies, we got to be really careful, and I'm not a aromatherapist, but one of the most gentle essential oils is lavender. And another one is vanilla oil. Now, we have it in a blend, which means that only 1% of the bottle is vanilla. So make sure if you follow this recipe, you're using a blend. I don't even know if you can get pure vanilla essential oil. But 8 drops of the blend plus 3 drops of lavender in a whole tablespoon of any kind of carrier oil. So just, nice clean oil. Mix that all, and then just take a little bit of the oil and rub it on the chest, and that can be helpful. It's going to be very diluted. That's all you need for a very young child. You can also, of course, use magnesium flakes in the bath. And I just picked up, but I didn't have time. It arrived yesterday. Dr. Matthew Walker, who, as I said, is a real expert in sleep, he recommended Dr. Richard Ferber as the best author for a book on children. So if you're looking for something, it doesn't talk about natural supplements or anything, but it's a very comprehensive book for kids. So if you're having any issues with your kids, that would be my recommendation via him.